Okay, so I really don't know where to start with this. I've been holding all this stuff in for a while, and I just need to get it off my chest because, frankly, I'm losing my mind trying to figure things out. I'm 33, and my wife, let's call her Sarah, and I have been married for 5 years. Everything was fine, at least I thought it was. Sure, we had the usual stuff, but we had a solid connection, or so I thought. Recently, though, I'm noticing some big red flags that make me think Sarah has been cheating on me. It started a few months ago. At first, it was small stuff. She'd come home from work later than usual, but I didn't think much of it. She has a demanding job, so I brushed it off. But then she started acting differently. More distant, more irritable. We used to be able to talk about anything, but suddenly every conversation felt forced. If I asked about her day, she'd just give me these one-word answers like, fine, or busy. I tried to let it slide, but something didn't sit right. Then there was her phone. At first, it was nothing. She'd leave it lying around, and I didn't think twice about it. But over time, I started noticing she was way more protective of it. She'd take it with her everywhere, even to the bathroom, and when I'd ask her about it, she'd snap at me. It's just my phone. Why are you always so suspicious? She started locking her phone, which she never did before. I don't know, I felt like I was going crazy, but it was like my gut was telling me something was off. I tried to ignore it, but the distance between us kept growing. We went from being intimate a few times a week to nothing. Maybe once a month, if that. When I tried to initiate things, she'd always come up with some excuse. I'm tired, or I have a headache, but it was always the same excuse. I tried talking to her about it, but she would always brush me off. She'd tell me I was overthinking things, or that I was being needy. But I know when someone is pulling away from you. Fast forward to last week. I found something on her phone. It was just a glimpse, but it was enough. She'd left her phone on the kitchen counter, and I happened to glance at the screen when a text came in. I know. I shouldn't have looked, but I was just so desperate for an answer. The text was from a guy I didn't recognize. The message was innocent enough on the surface, just a "Hey, are you free tonight?" But the timing of it raised some red flags. It was around the time she'd said she was going out for a girls' night. But I knew for a fact that none of her friends had mentioned anything about plans. I didn't confront her about it right away because I didn't want to seem crazy, but now I couldn't shake the thought of it. The more I thought about it, the more I started to think this wasn't just a one-off. Something was going on. Part of me wanted to just go straight to her and demand the truth. But another part of me was scared of what I might find out, and scared of the fallout. I knew if I confronted her without proof, she'd just deny it and make me feel insane for even questioning her. But if I kept digging, I might find something that would change everything. I didn't know what to do. So, after I found that text, I kept it to myself for a while. I told myself I wouldn't jump to conclusions, that it could be nothing, right? Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But it kept eating at me, and I couldn't let it go. I started noticing more things that didn't add up. Things that seemed small, but when you put them all together, they felt like pieces of a bigger picture I wasn't ready to see. One of the first things I noticed was how her routine had changed. She started getting up earlier, leaving for work earlier, too. And when she came home, she'd be on the phone with someone, usually texting, but she'd always lock her phone the moment I walked into the room. I'd catch a glimpse of the conversation, but it was like playing a game of who can hide their phone better. One night, I decided to take a risk. She was in the shower, and I knew she wouldn't be out for a few minutes. I thought maybe I could just check her phone, just this once. I was nervous, my hands were shaking, but I managed to unlock it with her fingerprint. Yeah, I know, that was bad on her part. I didn't expect to find much, maybe a few group chats with her friends or work texts. But what I found shocked me. There were several messages from this guy, Jake. She was talking to him a lot, more than I expected. What really got to me, though, were the things they were saying. It wasn't just friendly chit-chat. The texts were flirty, really flirty, and I could see she had sent him pictures. Nothing too crazy, just her in a cute outfit or something, but it was the tone that bothered me. She was calling him babe and handsome and sending winky faces. She even wrote, "I can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you so much." I felt my stomach drop. I didn't know who Jake was, but I had a bad feeling. It felt like my worst fear was coming true. I didn't confront her about it. Not yet. I was too freaked out, still processing what I had just seen. But now I couldn't unsee it. That night, when Sarah got out of the shower, I pretended everything was fine. I acted like nothing was wrong, but I could feel this knot in my chest that wasn't going away. I stayed up late, scrolling through the messages again and again. I started taking screenshots of everything. I knew I'd need proof if this ever came to a head. I thought about confronting her, about asking her straight out if she was seeing someone else. But what if she lied? I knew she was good at lying. She'd been doing it for months, if not longer. I had to be sure. And so, I decided to keep digging. I started paying closer attention to her behavior, noticing when she was being secretive and when she was acting too casual. Every little thing felt like a clue. The gut feeling I'd had for so long was now a full-on instinct. Something wasn't right, and I had to figure out what it was. I don't know if that makes me sound crazy, but I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something big, and I was terrified that I was about to find out the worst. So, after everything I saw on her phone, I was in this weird place where I couldn't just ignore it anymore. The idea of confronting her was terrifying, though. I didn't know if I was ready to hear her deny it all, tell me I was crazy, or worse, tell me that I was right. I wasn't sure I could handle that kind of confrontation, not without being absolutely sure of what was going on. I didn't want to make a fool of myself, but I also couldn't sit around pretending everything was fine while my wife was apparently dating someone else. The idea of getting more proof started creeping into my mind, and honestly, it felt like I had no choice. I needed to know the truth, but that meant I had to take some steps I wasn't proud of. I started doing some research, how to track someone's phone without them knowing, how to catch them in the act, things like that. I felt sick to my stomach reading articles about spying on your partner, but I honestly didn't know what else to do. I didn't want to hire a private investigator, it felt too extreme, but I also couldn't just sit here and wait for the pieces to fall into place. I had to take control of the situation. I began looking into tracking apps. I know that sounds like something from a bad thriller movie, but I was desperate. I found one that seemed pretty foolproof. It was supposed to let me track her location and see her messages without her ever knowing. I set it up one night while she was asleep. I had to move quickly and quietly, but somehow, I managed to install it without her noticing. I felt like a sleazeball, but at that point, I didn't care anymore. I just needed the truth. The next few days were a blur. I started checking the app obsessively. Every time she left the house, I was glued to my phone, watching her movements. She went to the gym. She went to the store. She went to lunch with a friend, but the app showed she didn't go to the gym that day. Instead, she drove to some random part of town I didn't recognize. My heart sank. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed to know what was really going on. I had been putting off confronting her, thinking maybe I was just imagining things, but at this point, I couldn't keep pretending. I had to find out if I was right. That night, Sarah told me she was going out with her friends. She didn't say who she was going with, which was strange because she usually did. She just said, "Don't wait up." I wanted to follow her. I thought about it for a second, just jumping in my car and following her, catching her in the act. I even put on shoes and grabbed my keys, but then I stopped myself. Was I really ready to see whatever she was doing? Was I really ready to confront her in public, if that was what was happening? I couldn't decide. Instead, I stayed home. But I kept watching the app. I could see where she was, and I felt this mix of anger and fear rise up inside of me as the dot on the screen stopped moving for a long time in some residential neighborhood. I knew she wasn't out with friends. She wasn't at a bar or a club. She wasn't anywhere close to any of the places she'd mentioned. I wanted to call her, ask her what she was doing, but I didn't. I just sat there in the silence of our house, gripping my phone, waiting for her to come home, knowing that when she did, things would change. I wasn't sure how or when, but I knew something was going to break, and I wasn't ready for it. When she finally came home around 2 a.m., she walked in like nothing had happened. She was acting all normal, casual, as if she hadn't just been lying to me for God knows how long. She didn't ask me about my night, didn't even look at me like she was guilty of anything. It felt like the calm before the storm. I wanted to say something, anything, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was so done with the games. But deep down, I knew it was time. I couldn't keep playing the part of the oblivious husband any longer. I needed to know what she was doing, and if she was cheating on me, I had to confront her. I didn't sleep that night. There was too much racing in my head, too many pieces of the puzzle I still couldn't figure out. I kept going over everything, her texts, the weird behavior, the tracker app. I kept telling myself I was just overthinking it. I wasn't crazy, I just needed to stay calm, right? But that calmness was slipping away fast. I felt like I was on the edge of something I couldn't control anymore, and the fear of what was coming made my hands shake. I wasn't ready for what I knew I had to do next. I needed answers, and I was about to get them, whether I was prepared or not. The next morning, Sarah was acting like everything was normal again. She was making coffee, humming in the kitchen, getting ready for work, just like any other day. I kept my distance, pretending to read the paper, but I was watching her, studying her every move. I wanted to believe there was some explanation, some innocent reason why she was acting so weird. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was no good excuse for everything that had happened. I decided that I couldn't wait any longer. I had to do it. I had to confront her. She finished her coffee and was about to leave for work when I called out to her. "Sarah, we need to talk." She turned to me looking surprised, but not really worried. That should have been my first clue. If she had been worried about anything, she would have known this was coming. Instead, she just rolled her eyes, like she had been waiting for me to say something. "Can it wait? I'm going to be late for work," she said, sounding a little annoyed, like I was inconveniencing her. "I don't think it can," I said, my voice coming out more forceful than I intended. She raised an eyebrow, clearly irritated now. "What's going on? What's this about?" I stood up from the table, my heart thumping in my chest. I was shaking, but I couldn't back down. "Not now." I walked over to where her phone was charging on the counter. I grabbed it and turned to her. "I found these," I said, showing her the screenshots of her texts with Jake. I didn't know what I expected from her, but I guess I thought she'd be shocked, maybe even guilty. But instead, her eyes flickered to the phone for a split second and then back to me. She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. "Really?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So, you're going to snoop through my phone now? You've really crossed the line, haven't you?" I felt a cold rush of anger shoot through me, but I didn't want to lose control. "I'm not snooping, Sarah. You've been acting like I'm invisible for months. This isn't about my insecurity anymore. This is about you lying to my face." Her expression changed, and I could see that she was getting defensive. "Oh, please. You've been so clingy lately. I've been trying to give you space. This is what happens when you're too needy. If you just trust me." "Don't even start with the trust me line," I snapped, my voice rising now. "You've been pulling away from me for months, and I've been sitting here, wondering what the hell happened to us. And now I find out you've been sending flirty texts to some guy behind my back. Do you think I'm stupid?" She stood there, silent for a moment, her face flushing with embarrassment or maybe anger, I couldn't tell. Then, with a sigh, she crossed her arms and leaned against the counter like she couldn't care less. "Fine," she said, rolling her eyes. "Yes, I've been texting Jake. He's just a friend. He's been there for me, unlike you. I needed someone to talk to." The defensiveness in her voice, the complete lack of remorse, it hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd been expecting denial, but this was worse. She wasn't even sorry. She was making excuses. "Sarah, stop," I said, my voice shaking with frustration. "This isn't about talking. You've been sneaking around, and you know it." She scoffed. "You're overreacting. I never slept with him, if that's what you're worried about." It felt like a slap in the face. "So what? If you didn't sleep with him, that makes it okay? You think I'm an idiot? I can see the way you've been treating me, and I don't need to see you in bed with him to know something's wrong." She sighed again, but this time it was louder, more annoyed. "Look, I'm not going to stand here and justify myself to you. You're being ridiculous. Maybe you should just take a breath and stop being so paranoid. We've been fine, okay?" I couldn't take it anymore. "No, Sarah, we're not fine, and you're not the person I thought you were. I don't even know who you are anymore." The silence in the kitchen was suffocating. I stood there, staring at her, not knowing what to say next. Part of me wanted to scream, wanted to tell her I couldn't take this lying down. But the other part of me just wanted to walk away and pretend none of this had ever happened. She finally looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something different in her eyes. But it wasn't guilt. It was irritation. Like I was the one making things difficult. Like I was the problem. "Look, I've had enough of this," she said, picking up her purse. "I'm going to work. I'll be back later, and we can talk then. Maybe you'll have calmed down by then." And with that, she left. I stood there, feeling like a fool. I don't know why, but as soon as she left that morning, I felt this strange mix of relief and dread. Relief, because the confrontation was over, for now, but dread, because I knew this wasn't anywhere near done. There was still so much left unsaid. So many things hanging in the air between us. She hadn't even owned up to anything, not really. She didn't seem the least bit sorry. It was like she was just waiting for me to get over it and move on. But I couldn't. Not now. I knew too much. I wasn't going to let her treat me like this. Not anymore. I tried to stay busy while she was at work. I didn't want to sit around and stew in my thoughts, but it was impossible. My mind kept going back to her words, her attitude. How she dismissed everything like it was no big deal. Like I was the one making all this drama. But I wasn't. I was just asking for the truth. At some point, I had this thought. What if she's not just texting this guy? What if she's seeing him in person? I mean, her behavior had been so sketchy for months, and this was the first time I'd caught her red-handed. But what if there was more? That idea hit me like a truck. So, I decided to do something I hadn't even thought about before. I was going to follow her. I didn't know if it was the smartest decision, but I was desperate. I needed answers. I needed to see for myself if she was lying to my face about everything. I couldn't just sit around anymore hoping she'd suddenly change her mind and confess. That evening, when she told me she was going out again, I knew this was my chance. She said she was going to meet her friend Jake, whoever the hell that was, and I didn't even flinch when she told me. I just nodded like it was no big deal, but inside, I was planning my next move. I waited until she left, and then I grabbed my coat and slipped out the door behind her. I followed her car at a safe distance, making sure she didn't see me. I couldn't help the rush of adrenaline coursing through my veins as I watched her drive off, heart pounding in my chest. This felt wrong on so many levels, but I didn't care. I needed to know. She drove for about 20 minutes before pulling up to a small house in a quiet part of town. My stomach dropped when I saw the address. It was the same neighborhood I had seen on the tracker app. I parked a few blocks away and waited. For a moment, I thought about just turning around and driving back home. But I couldn't. I had to see this through. I watched her get out of the car, looking around like she was making sure no one saw her. And then she walked up to the door of the house. I wanted to scream. This wasn't just a friendly hangout, like she said. She was walking into someone else's house. I didn't know whose house it was, but I didn't need to. I knew enough. My hands were shaking now, my mind spinning, but I couldn't leave. I needed to see her face when she realized I knew. I wanted her to know I wasn't going to let this go. After about 15 minutes, I saw the door open again, and Sarah stepped out, this time with a guy I'd never seen before. They were standing there, talking close, too close. And then she kissed him. It was like a punch to the gut. I had always wondered if something more was going on. But this, seeing it with my own eyes, it was worse than I could have imagined. I didn't know what to do next. Part of me wanted to walk up there, yell at them both, expose everything. But I knew if I did that, I would lose any chance of getting the answers I needed. I had to stay calm. I watched them for a few more minutes, my heart racing, my body frozen. Then, Sarah said goodbye to the guy, gave him one last hug, and got back in her car. She drove off, and I followed her back home. When she pulled into the driveway, I stayed back a little, watching from a distance. I had all the proof I needed. I went back home, sitting in the car for a long time, staring at the house, trying to figure out what I was going to do. This wasn't just about texting anymore. She had betrayed me. I had seen it with my own eyes. The weight of it all hit me hard. I couldn't believe this was the woman I had married. The woman I had trusted. The woman I thought I knew. And now I was sitting here, alone, with no idea what to do next. I couldn't go inside just yet. I had to think, to process what had just happened. I didn't know if I could even look her in the face anymore. But one thing was for sure, I wasn't going to let this go. Not this time. I sat in the car for what felt like hours. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything. I'd seen her kiss him. I knew it wasn't just a mistake or some innocent friendship. This was real. My wife, the woman I'd spent the last 5 years with, had been hiding this from me. And for how long? How many more times had she done this behind my back? I didn't have answers to any of those questions, and the not knowing was tearing me apart. When I finally made myself get out of the car, it felt like I was walking toward a confrontation that I couldn't back out of. The house, the life I'd built with Sarah, suddenly felt alien. I didn't know what was more terrifying, facing her or the idea that I was about to lose everything I thought I knew about our relationship. I walked inside, trying to keep my breathing steady, but it felt like my heart was about to explode out of my chest. Sarah was already home, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. She barely glanced up when I walked in, her her usual indifference almost worse than anything she could have said. "Hey," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. She looked up, flashing me a fake smile. "Hey, you okay? You're asking me if I'm okay?" The question burned, but I kept it to myself. "Yeah," I replied, sitting down across from her. "We need to talk." Her eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of recognition passing over her face. She knew something was up, but she didn't expect what was coming. She set her phone down and leaned back, crossing her arms, already putting up walls. "What now?" I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I wasn't even sure where to start. Do I tell her I know? Do I play it cool and see how she reacts first? But I couldn't hold it in anymore. I had to be direct. I had to be real. "Sarah, I saw you tonight. With him." Her face went completely blank. It was like all the color drained out of her, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, this was the moment where she would finally come clean. But no, instead of guilt or panic, I saw annoyance. "Are you spying on me now?" she snapped, her tone sharp and defensive. I clenched my fists. I had to keep it together. "I followed you. I saw you kiss him. You don't get to lie to me anymore." For a moment, there was silence. I could see her mind racing, looking for an escape, a way to justify herself. Finally, she sighed and uncrossed her arms, looking at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Oh, come on, really?" she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "So now you're stalking me? That's how you're going to handle this?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Stalking? You've been lying to me for months, Sarah. You've been sneaking around, and you're calling me the problem." She scoffed and stood up, pacing the room. "You don't get it. You've been smothering me for months. I've been trying to get away from you. I needed space. I needed someone who actually listens to me, not just someone who constantly accuses me of stuff." "You don't get to do this," I shot back. "You don't get to push me away and then blame me for your choices. You're the one who's been texting him. You're the one who kissed him, not me." Her eyes flashed with anger, and I could see she was about to lash out, but then she stopped. She took a deep breath, like she was collecting her thoughts, then turned to face me, her voice now quiet but sharp. "You want the truth?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. "Fine. Yes, I've been seeing him. It's not just texts. We've been hanging out, getting close. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it would hurt you, but it's been going on for a while now." I felt my blood run cold. Hearing the words out loud was like a gut punch. It was one thing to suspect, but another entirely to hear it confirmed. "How long?" I barely managed to choke out. She hesitated for a second, like she was trying to figure out how much to reveal. "A few months. We started talking more at work, and things just happened. I didn't mean for it to get this far, but it did." "This far?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're married, Sarah. We're married. And you let it get this far." Her face twisted, and she threw her hands up in frustration. "You don't get it. You're always so distant. I've been asking you for attention for months, and all I get is you shutting me out. What did you expect me to do?" I felt like the ground was slipping beneath me. Everything she said was a justification, a reason to make her feel better about the mess she'd made. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't remorse. It was just excuses. I stood up, my hands trembling. "So, you think this is my fault?" She didn't respond immediately. Her silence said it all. I could feel the anger rising inside of me again. This wasn't about misunderstandings. This wasn't about anything other than her deciding to cheat and then blaming me for it. She had made her choice, and I wasn't going to let her walk away from this one. I didn't know what I was supposed to say next, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And whatever came next, I was done being the one who's always left in the dark. The air between us felt like it was burning, but I didn't care. My mind was too fogged with anger and betrayal to be rational. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her understand the weight of what she'd done. But instead, I stood there, seething, trying to get a grip on myself. I had asked for the truth. I had demanded it. And now I had it. But hearing her say it out loud didn't make it any easier. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt hollow. I took a step back, my chest tight. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I said, my voice low and shaky. I wasn't even sure if I was talking to her or just trying to make sense of my own emotions. "I thought I knew you, Sarah. I thought we built something together. But you've been lying to me, hiding this, and for what? Because I wasn't paying enough attention?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there, her eyes darting around like she was looking for an escape route. But there was no easy way out of this. Not anymore. I didn't want it to happen this way, she said, her voice quieter now, like she was trying to soften the blow. I didn't plan on falling for him, but I needed something. I needed someone who actually saw me. Saw her. I shook my head in disbelief. So you just decided to get involved with him? Behind my back. And then what? You think this is somehow my fault because I wasn't paying enough attention? My voice cracked on the last word, but I wasn't going to hold back anymore. She winced, her expression faltering for a second. But then she straightened up and threw her shoulders back, trying to act like she wasn't bothered by what I was saying. I wasn't the one who checked out of this marriage first. You were okay? You've been distant for months, and I've been stuck trying to make things work alone. I could feel the anger building again, but something else was rising too. This numbness, this sense of being utterly drained. I was done with her excuses. Done with her shifting the blame. This wasn't about me being distant or not paying enough attention. This was about her choosing to step outside the marriage. So what now? I asked, my voice tight, like I was swallowing down a lump in my throat. You just want me to accept this? Pretend like everything's fine? You've been sleeping with this guy, and now I'm supposed to just move on and forget about it. She didn't even seem to register how hurtful her actions were. She just sighed, shaking her head like I was overreacting. You're making this harder than it has to be, she said, almost too casually. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I just need some space to figure things out, okay? I can't keep doing this with you, and I don't think you can keep doing this with me. I couldn't breathe. I took a step back, like I might fall if I didn't. So you're asking for a break now? After everything? Not a break, she said quickly, now a little defensive. I just need some space to think, to figure out what I want. And maybe you do too. I don't know. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. She wasn't even asking for forgiveness. She wasn't even sorry. She just wanted space. Space to keep seeing Jake, space to think about what she wanted in her life, without me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. But instead, I just stood there, feeling my chest tighten, suffocated by the weight of everything she had just said. Is this really what you want? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't hesitate. I think it's what I need right now, yeah. I felt like I had been slapped. So, what, you just get to decide. You get to make all the decisions for us, for our marriage, and I just have to go along with it. She didn't answer right away. She just stood there, looking at me with a mix of frustration and exhaustion, like she had been carrying this weight for far longer than I had realized. I don't know what to tell you, she said softly. I can't keep doing this. I don't know if I even want to keep doing this. The words hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I just stared at her, waiting for something, anything, that might make sense of what she was saying. But there was nothing. She had already made up her mind. She had already decided that this wasn't enough for her anymore. I couldn't stay there, looking at her anymore. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted, she was gone. And in her place was someone who didn't seem to care at all. I think I need to go, I said quietly, finally breaking the silence. I can't do this right now. Sarah just nodded, looking tired, like she'd been expecting this all along. Yeah, probably a good idea. I turned and walked out of the room, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. Every step felt like it took me farther away from everything I thought I knew, from the life I had built, from her. I didn't know what was next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay here, in this house, with the person who had just destroyed everything. As I walked out the front door, I felt like I was walking out of my own life. And I wasn't sure if I was ever coming back. The drive was a blur. I didn't even remember how I got from the house to my friend Matt's place. But somehow, I was there, sitting on his couch with a beer in hand. The feeling of disconnection was overwhelming. It was like I was watching my life from the outside, detached from everything I had known. I didn't know what to feel, how to feel. Anger, sadness, confusion. They were all tangled together in this twisted knot in my stomach. Matt didn't say much at first. He knew something was up when I showed up at his door, looking like I'd just been run over by a truck. I didn't tell him the full story. I couldn't. Not yet. It was too raw. Too painful. You want to talk about it? Matt asked after a few minutes of awkward silence, his voice low. I shook my head. I don't know if I can. I don't even know what the hell is happening right now. He took a sip of his beer, watching me. It's Sarah, right? I couldn't hide it anymore. Yeah, it's her. She's been seeing someone else. Behind my back. I found out tonight. Matt's face went from casual to concerned in an instant. He leaned forward, clearly trying to process what I'd just said. Damn, man. I'm sorry. I had no idea. I didn't either, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. I thought we were fine. I thought everything was good. But I was wrong. I didn't want to talk about the details, the texts, the kiss, everything I'd seen that night. It felt like I was just replaying a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. It doesn't make sense, Matt, I said, finally looking up at him. She says it's because I wasn't paying enough attention, that I've been too distant. But I don't get it. I've been there for her. I've always been there. Why didn't she just tell me if she needed space? Why didn't she talk to me instead of this? Matt sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I can't tell you why she did it, man. People do messed up things when they're not happy, or when they think they can get away with it. But you didn't deserve this. You didn't deserve to be lied to. I stared down at my beer bottle, feeling the weight of his words sinking in. I keep thinking, maybe I missed something. Maybe I didn't see it coming. Maybe I could have done something different. But that's not the point, is it? I didn't do anything wrong. She made this choice. And now I have to live with it. I didn't want to be angry at her anymore, but it was hard not to be. The anger bubbled up, uninvited. I don't even know if I want to fix this. I don't know if I can fix this. She asked for space. She's still seeing him, Matt. She kissed him. I can't just pretend like nothing happened. Matt nodded slowly. You're right. And you don't have to pretend anything. You need to figure out what you want now. Not her. Not him. But you. You're the one who's been betrayed. I started trailing off. I just never thought this would happen. Not with her. Not with my wife. We had plans, Matt. We had a future. It wasn't supposed to be like this. I couldn't finish my sentence. The grief of it all hit me like a wave. My throat tightened, and for the first time in days, the dam broke. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Matt didn't say anything as I tried to pull myself together. He just sat there, waiting for me to get it out. After a minute or so, I wiped my eyes and tried to regain some composure. It felt like I was seeing everything clearly for the first time, and yet everything was still clouded in confusion. I don't know what to do now, I whispered, more to myself than to him. She said she needed space to figure things out. But what does that even mean? What if she doesn't come back? What if she chooses him? Matt took a deep breath and set his bottle down on the table. You have to decide if you want her back, man. If you even want to try and fix things. But it's got to be your choice, not hers. You can't be the one begging for her attention. Not now. You need to be strong enough to decide what's right for you. I nodded slowly. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was the only one that made sense. I just never thought she'd do this to me, I said, shaking my head again. I thought we were better than that. I thought we were better than that. Matt leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Yeah, man. I hear you. And honestly, I don't think it's about what you did or didn't do. It's about what she decided. But you don't have to keep letting her hurt you. You deserve better than this. The words were like a slap in the face, but in a good way. They stung, but they also woke me up. I had to stop focusing on what she wanted. I needed to start thinking about what I wanted. I didn't know what I was going to do next. I didn't know if I was going to confront Sarah again, if I was going to try to save this marriage, or if I was going to walk away for good. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to keep pretending I didn't deserve more than this. I had to take back control of my life. And that started by facing the truth of everything that had happened. Thanks, man, I said quietly, lifting my bottle toward him in a half-hearted toast. No problem, Matt said, nodding. You're going to get through this. Whatever happens, you'll get through it. The words didn't fix anything, but for the first time in a long while, they gave me a little bit of hope. I wasn't completely broken. I could rebuild, even if I didn't know how just yet. And no matter what happened, I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this be the end of my story. I spent the next few days in a kind of emotional limbo. I wasn't at home anymore. I'd been staying with Matt, trying to get my head straight, but everything felt so wrong. I couldn't escape the memories of Sarah, of our life together, the way it used to be. I kept thinking back to all the little things that felt like signs, the things I had brushed off, thinking they were just normal relationship bumps. But now, I couldn't unsee them. I couldn't unknow the truth. Matt was great, but I could see he was starting to worry about me. I wasn't talking much, just sitting around, staring at the walls, trying to figure out where to go from here. What the hell do you do when everything you thought you knew about your life has just crumbled in front of you? One evening, after a few too many beers, I finally called Sarah. I didn't know if I was ready for this, but I couldn't keep avoiding it. I couldn't keep running from the mess I needed to face. If I was ever going to move forward, I had to hear it from her mouth. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Hello. Her voice was strained, like she was waiting for an argument. Sarah, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. Can you meet me? There was a long pause on the other end. I could practically hear her weighing her options. Finally, she sighed. I don't know. I just need to talk to you, face to face. I cut her off. I can't keep doing this. You need to stop avoiding me. She didn't answer immediately, but I could tell she was frustrated. Finally, she said, Okay, I'll meet you at the park in an hour. I hung up before she could say anything else. I wasn't sure if I was ready for what was coming, but I knew I couldn't back out now. I had to see this through. The park was quiet when I arrived. It was late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows on the ground. I sat on a bench, my hands gripping the edges, trying to keep my mind from spiraling. Every time I thought about what I was going to say to her, it felt like the words got stuck in my throat. Sarah showed up about 15 minutes later, walking toward me with her head down, almost like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. Her face was softer than I remembered, like she had been crying, or at least holding back tears. She stopped a few feet away, not quite close enough to touch, but still within reach. You wanted to talk, she said, her voice almost too calm. So talk. I could feel the anger bubbling again, but this time, I kept it in check. I didn't want to scream at her or let my emotions take over. I just needed to get through this conversation, no matter how hard it was. I saw you with him, Sarah, I said, my voice tight. I saw the kiss. You can't deny it now. You can't keep pretending like this is just some little mistake. You've been lying to me. She winced but didn't look away. I know, she said quietly. I didn't think you'd find out. I didn't think you'd catch me. I felt my chest tighten, but I couldn't stop. I had to get it out. I don't care about the why anymore, Sarah. You made a choice. You chose him. And that hurts more than anything. She looked down at the ground, her shoulders slumping, and for the first time in a long while, I saw a flicker of something. Guilt, maybe? I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did, I shot back. You hurt me. You broke us. And now I don't know how I'm supposed to go on pretending like everything's fine. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. I know. I screwed up. I don't know how to fix this. But I'm sorry. I really am. I looked at her, really looked at her, and I realized something. The woman in front of me wasn't the woman I had married. She was someone else. Someone who had made choices I couldn't understand. Someone who had been so selfish in the moment, she hadn't cared about the destruction left in her wake. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. You're sorry? You're sorry after everything? After all the lies, after everything you've done? She reached out like she was going to touch me, but I stepped back, holding my hand up to stop her. Don't touch me. The air between us was thick, suffocating, and for a moment, we just stood there, neither of us saying anything. There was so much unsaid, so much hurt, that I didn't know how to begin to fix it. I didn't even know if I wanted to. I don't think I can do this anymore, I said, the words coming out almost as a whisper. I don't think I can be with you after this. I don't think I can forgive you. Her face crumpled, and for a second, I thought she might break down. But she didn't. She stood there, her eyes glassy, biting her lip, trying to hold it together. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. I don't want to lose you. But I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep pretending like we were something we weren't anymore. I don't want to lose me either, I replied quietly. And right now, I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore. I stood up, feeling the weight of everything that had just been said. I couldn't fix this. I couldn't fix her. And I sure as hell couldn't fix me if I kept holding on to something that was already broken beyond repair. I'm done, Sarah, I said, my voice final, cold even. I need to go. And I need you to go too. She opened her mouth like she was going to say something more, but I didn't let her. I turned and walked away, feeling like I was walking away from the last piece of my old life. As I left the park, I didn't feel angry anymore. I didn't feel sad. I just felt empty. But I also knew one thing. This was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do, but it was the right thing. It was time to let go.